CYMATICA, Book 1, Chapter 1, The Stolen Child. Cambiari woke in the cold half-light of her small room under the rafters, her breath misting out from beneath the covers like smoke. One star shone through the tiny glass pane above her bed frame. Grandfather was standing in the doorway. She felt his presence before she saw him, his vibration fanning out into the room like spectral fern fronds. Gradually, the rough edge of his furred hood and broad shoulders came into clarity against the deeper dark of the doorway. She blinked slowly at him from under the edge of the animal skin quilt, hoping to fool him into thinking she was still asleep. He did not move, but she felt his energy field sharpen a bit. She sighed and pushed the covers down. She could tell he was smiling. The sharp point of his bow and plate showed, slung over his shoulder. He was dressed for hunting. "Come," he rumbled, and she reached for her boots and jacket. The thick hut door whined softly behind them as they left the warmth and briny smoke of the kitchen fire and entered the cold quiet enveloping their small home. Star crystals crunched under Cambiari's boots as she crossed the short band of grass separating the cabin from the high forest edge. She resisted the urge to prance about on the grass like she would have done a year or so earlier, remembering suddenly it was her birthday. She would be 14 today. A crow let out a sharp cry as she entered the wood's edge, its wings flashing dark as it flew out into the clearing behind them. Grandfather walked silently as always, his tall, hulking form the only thing Cambiari had to trace as she followed him onto the path beneath the light gray trunks of the trees. Newly fallen oak leaves rustled about their feet. As their surroundings darkened, her grandfather's spirit signature came into relief, the complex pattern of geometric light coalescing behind him in familiar patterns of concentration, focus, and intent. This morning, Cambiari noticed something different in his pattern, something she'd never seen before. There was a collection of 5-pointed stars surrounding the intent area of his pattern this morning. If she didn't know better, she would have called it something like fear. Grandfather was never afraid. She studied it closer, trying to catch its meaning without thinking too hard about it. She was focusing so sharply on her grandfather's pattern, she didn't at first notice the other signature until it was right up next to them. It was that of a bear, a very large one. Its mass and pungent smell flowed past them in the dark like a wave, making Cambiari's neck hairs stand on end. Grandfather, as usual, didn't change his path or intent in any way. He had known it was coming, of course. He stopped. The bear's mass flowed on past them as they both became still as trees. As Grandfather reached behind him and took out his bow and plate, Cambiari studied the light signatures glowing softly all around them, their sounds shimmering just beyond reach of human hearing. A moth gave off a tiny filigree of square light as it slept against the rough tree bark next to her. A fox brushed over and under the fallen pines, its fur and circular light patterns flowing through the tangled underbrush like water. Bird patterns hummed above and below with a faint musical whine. She tucked her chin deeper into the fur of her hood. Grandfather laid his bow and plate down in the underbrush. Cambiari came suddenly all the way awake, just realizing then she had still been somewhat asleep in the dark shimmer of the night forest. Grandfather was gazing off into the forest ahead, his body perfectly taut and relaxed somehow all at once. Cambiari followed his gaze. A small deer stood there, or at least that's what it would be if she could see beyond its light signature to the actual being behind it. As her thoughts took in the geometry of its pattern, her eyes gradually picked out the dark leaf-like ears and graceful curve of neck bent behind the filigree of soul stars. Now Grandfather was looking at her. She knitted her brows back at him, shooting another question beyond him at the bow and plate. How was he going to take it if he did not use the bow? Slowly she became aware the deer was now closer. Its signature glowed against the dark of the forest. Her grandfather signed watch and turned to look at the deer. He began to sing. His voice vibrated low along the air with an overtone of high notes playing intricate melodies over the top of his low hum. As she watched, her grandfather's soul signature began to change. The light patterns that were so familiar to her became strange, the 5-pointed star shapes becoming sharper, the surrounding patterns morphing from Grandfather into something else. For the second time that morning, Cambiari's neck hairs prickled and stood on end. Grandfather was becoming something else. Slowly she realized what it was. He was becoming the deer. As she glanced back and forth from the deer's dark shape to the motionless hulk of her grandfather, the light patterns both changed, but the deer's only slightly. It was her grandfather's patterns that moved, shaping the deer's soul in every facet, each pattern spinning and coalescing like a twin star hovering in the forest, echoing the shapes in his voice, calling to the deer's soul like a child asking to play. The deer took another step forward. The pattern changed. As Cambiari watched bit by bit, her grandfather changed his own pattern into something different, not his own and not the deer's. It was the deer's pattern, but wrong. The pattern was going wrong. Cambiari's training kept her from crying out, but she could not prevent from reaching a hand toward her grandfather, signing a word, "Stop." To her surprise, he did stop. As his voice quieted, his signature spun back to normal, and the deer's returned to its own natural symbols, its breath evening out, its head tossing a bit in surprise. But then he signed back to her, "Your turn." As Cambiari stared at the deer, she tried to shape its soul signature, to match her own symbols to its delicate balance and perfect geometry, untrammeled by human thought and confusion. The deer had a beautiful pattern. And finally, as she lost herself in the pattern, she was able to shape it. Cambiari and the deer became linked, mirroring each other like twins. She felt her heart tug sharply as she perfected the connection, everything around them suddenly in sharper focus. She realized she was looking out of the deer's eyes as well as her own. "Now," said her grandfather, so softly it was barely a word. Cambiari tried to think how to do it without thinking. Thought got in the way. She studied the pattern inside the deer that had so puzzled her when she noticed it in her grandfather's soul. Fear or something like it, the 5-pointed star. She found it. Several of the star shapes were clustered around the deer's heart. She could see the same pattern around her own heart, hovering just before her in the air. Suddenly, she understood what to do. She began to sing, slowly her voice finding the pattern, catching on strands, taking hold. She increased the number of 5-pointed stars in the pattern, humming in synchronicity with the deer. The deer's star shapes also increased. She brought them closer together, squeezing them into a cluster around her own heart. The deer's shapes did the same. She suddenly understood that the shapes were not fear exactly, they were death. She'd seen them before on the plate when grandfather played it with a bow to catch his animals. She took a breath and relaxed her entire body. She pulled the 5-pointed stars in until they smothered her heart, slowed its beat, stopped everything. She was watching from above suddenly, looking down at the path from somewhere above the tree line as the deer toppled over, like a small tree falling to earth. A shape about the same size but a short distance away did the same. The two shapes fell to the ground and stayed until a bigger shape next to the small one moved, leaped over the smaller form, and did something in the air over its chest with its hands. Cambiari gasped, opened her eyes, choked as her breath stuttered into her lungs. It was cold air. She stared up at her grandfather, his face inscrutable under the fur of his hood, silhouetted against the sky. "Hush," he said. "You did well," he said. "Now come." Firelight flickered over the lip of the door as grandmother stood holding it open for them, her earrings catching one bead of firelight and winking like a small red star. Cambiari struggled under the weight of the deer, its head draped over her shoulder, one hoof knocking disturbingly against the fur of her coat. Her nose was full of the mushroom-meat animal smell of its fur. Grandmother was smiling. She kept her eyes on the black fur boots as they carried the deer past her grandmother and in through the door, heaved its sagging weight over to the slab of kitchen table and laid it gently on the surface. Cambiari backed away from the table, stood by the fireplace, holding her hands behind her as if to warm them. Grandmother's eyes were still smiling as she moved over to the deer, tenderly taking its 4 legs and stretching them out so it was lying more symmetrically, as if making it comfortable. She did not reach for a knife. As Cambiari watched, her grandmother unwound the scarf around her neck and laid it on a chair. She put her hands in front of her body, smoothing the air from her solar plexus up over her head, as though pulling invisible strings straight. Then she began to sing. Her voice was low for a woman, high compared to grandfather's. This morning it held more power than Cambiari had ever heard. Her high melodies, layered over the low, low hum of her bass note, seemed to float up into the rafters and swim there like fish, while the deep notes made the stone mantle on the fireplace reverberate in sympathy. For the third time that morning, Cambiari's neck hairs prickled. She stood up straighter and took her hands from behind her back, held them in front of her to try to catch onto what grandmother was singing. The firelight flickered, the hut hummed. The deer on the table moved its ears, its hooves, it raised its head and looked at Cambiari with a dark, dark eye. It raised itself from the tabletop with one sinuous shake and trotted out the open front door on trembling legs that looked just born. Cambiari closed her mouth after a moment, turned from the open, empty doorway, and walked over to grandmother and hugged her fiercely. "Thank you," she whispered, then went to grandfather, standing like a bear near the ladder to the loft, his head brushing the herbs hanging from the ceiling, and did the same. It was the strangest and most beautiful birthday gift she had ever received. So, I'm Jodina Meehan. Thank you for listening to that little bit of story from my upcoming book, CYMATICA. I'm going to tell you more about it in a moment, but I actually want to start today by talking about the first time that I came to the CYMATICS conference. It was 10 years ago, and there were so many amazing speakers, but really the one thing that I remember from that conference was Mandara's story that she told about an angel appearing before her and basically telling her that she needed to bring cymatics out into the world and that one day cymatics would be a household word. And the reason that that really connected with me and that I remembered it is that I had a similar experience long before I heard of Mandara or came to the conference or had heard anything about cymatics. Actually, I was a painter about halfway through college. I was an oil painter who mostly focused on doing portraits of people. And I had a dream one night that I was standing in the center of a giant room about this size, actually. But it was all dark, a little darker than it is here. And I looked out into the room, and it was filled with the paintings that I was told this is what I was going to do in the future. This is the future of my art, and these are all the paintings I'm going to create. And I opened my eyes in the morning, and still had this vision of what the art looked like, and I couldn't make heads or tails of it. It was so different than anything that I was doing at the time. It was all these black canvases, deep black, with these amorphous white figures coming out of the center. And I felt like they were alive, and maybe they came from space, or maybe they came from under the ocean. I didn't know, but they were trying to tell me something. And it was like, all right, this is what I need to do, but I have no idea how to do it, or even what I'm trying to do. So for the next 3 years, I drew and I painted what I had seen in my head and was trying to get at what are these things. And I did several sets of charcoals and paintings. And then one day I discovered Hans Jenny's book, CYMATICS. I just picked it up from my local library in this tiny town in Vermont. How it even got there, I have no idea. But I opened it up to the first page, and there were my paintings just staring out at me. And I said, oh, I'm not supposed to be using brushes. I'm supposed to be using sound waves to paint, apparently. How does this work? How can I do that? So I went online, and first person I found was Jeff Volk, his site. And I was just completely amazed because he put his phone number right on his website. And I do a lot of work online, and I was just amazed by that. And I was like, this is great. So I gave him a call. And Jeff was just so gracious and warm and open to talking to me about cymatics, and introduced me to, what had been going on in the world so far, and said he was coming to a Dowsers convention in Vermont within a couple of weeks, and that I could come meet him there. And so I came, and that's how I met Jeff Folk, and I saw his presentation there, which I just thought was wonderful because it was all about all the things that I get excited about, whether it's poetry or art or physics or how the universe works and the mystery of things. And so that was really wonderful. And then shortly after that, I also connected up with Eric Larson, who I don't believe is here this time, but he's an amazing cymatics engineer and creator. And he actually was also living just at the time about 45 minutes from where I was, which I thought was incredible. And he came to my small town of Brattleboro and brought a Kaladny plate and played it for me in the parking lot of my local co-op. We were like, well, I met you on the internet. And he was like, well, I met you on the internet, so we'll meet in the parking lot of the co-op. And and obviously, he turned out to be a wonderful guy, and it was all great. But I just remember that moment of standing there with the plate on the concrete and not knowing what was going to happen, and he pulled the bow, and this amazing creature formed itself before my eyes, and it was alive, and it was like it was sending me a message from the universe. And all of a sudden, several things that had been bothering me in the back of my head my entire life just made sense about how the universe works. And so that was just incredible. I'll always remember that first moment. And so I went home, and what I did was I committed. As an artist, it's often hard to commit to things. You want to sort of keep all your options open all the time. And in this case, I said, this is incredible enough, this is important enough, I had a dream about it, I want to do it, I'm committing to, I'm going to put my brushes down. I love painting with brushes, but I said until I achieve some sort of benchmark, milestone, what I want to achieve painting with sound waves, I'm not going to paint with brushes anymore. That point hasn't been reached yet. 10 years later, I'm still going for something that I don't know what it is, but someday I'll get there and I'll pick up my brushes again. And in the meantime, I started making cymatic designs and recording them in whatever way that I could. One of my drives has always been to try to make cymatics solid and permanent, so it's something you can hang on your wall. And that's a project I'm still working on. But in the meantime, that didn't seem like enough. It seemed like I needed to be helping more to put the word out there for other people as well, not just kind of working in my own studio, having fun with cymatics. So I started the Journal of Cymatics, and the reason that I started that is because I saw, by searching around online, I found these incredible people out there who are doing amazing things with this stuff no one knew anything about. And I didn't feel like the right people were finding them. I didn't feel like people were hearing enough about what they were doing. So I started the journal as a way to kind of showcase and bring to the forefront and use some of my online skills that I have to get traffic to the journal so that we would start building an audience and really showcasing the work of several of the people that are here today and many more from around the world. And so it's been working fairly well. We have over 3,000 followers on the journal in 300 countries right now. And if you are doing anything in the world of cymatics or have done or would like to see your work published there, I really encourage you after my talk today to come down and give me your info and tell me what you'd like to have put on the journal. And it's like a 99.99% chance I'll say yes. I almost never say no if it's good in any way. So the other thing that I did was I started something called the School of Cymatics, and one day I do have a dream, maybe 10 years from now, to have an actual physical School of Cymatics. But right now I have an online School of Cymatics. We have 800 members there, and the purpose of that site is really not a news site or to showcase my own work. I have some of my own work up there, but it's more to allow scholars and students of cymatics around the world to network, to meet each other, to get together. They create their own pages and they really showcase their own work, and then they put out questions about what they're doing. So it allows people to collaborate on projects and get help with projects. And then finally, really showcase what they're doing and what they're proud of. And so that's what the School of Cymatics is about right now. And it's completely free. It's completely open to anyone that would like to go in and start a page or start a conversation or ask people for help with their projects. I really encourage you to do that too. So in the meantime, back in my studio, working on my own little art projects, I've done lots of crazy things. I've created 5 different original instruments for making sound waves visible and recorded them in various ways in videos and put them out there. And one day I got an email from this nice lady in Montreal who said, I work for Cirque du Soleil, and this guy, Pedro Perez, who's the artistic director for Cirque du Soleil for the show Totem, is looking for a cymatics film clip to use in the show, and would you be willing to do that? And I said, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'd love my first commission to be for Cirque du Soleil. That'd be awesome. But, wait a minute, is this email real? And so I emailed her back, and yes, it was real. And I got on the phone with them, and they told me that what they were looking for, and they sent me a clip of what they were looking for, the kind of thing, And it's a clip of one of Hans Jenny's videos. And they're like, we'd like something like this. Can you do this? And I was like, yes. Yeah, I'll figure that out. Oh, man. So I really had no idea. I'd not done anything like his videos of cymatics at the time. I was all just acoustics things. And so anyway, I said yes, and 2 weeks later, in 2 weeks, that's the time I had. So I purchased my first wave driver from Pasco Scientific and had it shipped into the studio overnight and started trying to figure out how to put it together, and quickly called up Eric Larson, who was then in California, and showed him videos of what I was doing, why it wasn't working, and I was like, Eric, help! And he wonderfully sort of walked me through from California to Vermont, setting up my first wave driver, and got it working. And so then I made some footage of the images and sent it over, and they were like, oh no, this is going to be projected 20 feet wide down onto the performers in the ring, and the resolution is too low, and you've got to hire a professional photographer. So I said, okay. So I did that, and so anyway, the end of that story is that that piece is currently touring with Totem, which I think is in Singapore right now. But yeah, after I finished it, they said it would be on tour for the next 10 years, so I was really happy about that. But the other thing that happened, and this was just 2014, so last year, that was really exciting was that I got another commission to do a CYMATICS segment for National Geographic show Brain Games. I don't know if you ever watched that show, but I think it's really great. I love Jason Silva and all his crazy videos that he does on the side too. If you've never seen Jason Silva's videos, They're basically called shots of awe, and they're just about how amazing the universe is. And anyway, so again, Jeff Folk actually connected me up with the producer of Brain Games, and they wanted to put a segment in of cymatics for the show Patterns, and they actually came to my little studio in Vermont to film that section, which was pretty exciting for me. So right now I want to just take a moment to talk about Jeff Folk, because I've always known that he was the person that first introduced me to the world of cymatics and was my first main connection. And since I've been here yesterday, I've talked to so many people at the conference, and we talk about all these exciting things about cymatics, and at some point we ask each other, you know, how did you come to the world of cymatics, and how did you discover it? It's an obscure thing. How did you get into it? And most of the people that I talked to yesterday said Jeff Folk was my first contact. He was the person that I found, and he was the person that brought me into this world. And so I just want to take a moment to please give some appreciation for that, because there are so many people that are here, including myself, that might not be here if it wasn't for Jeff Folk. All right, so I'm actually going to play this one of my instruments that I've built here for you in a moment, but first I want to talk a little bit about what's really most exciting to me in the world of cymatics right now, and that is all of the young people around the world. And when I say young people, I include, you know, it's pretty long, broad category there that I consider people to be young. And what they've been doing with cymatics all over the world just in the last 10 years. I personally know of 7 university students around the world, from like Romania to Spain to the US, who have decided to do their thesis in cymatics and gotten their professors to agree. And whether it was in science or physics or music or art, these students all chose that as their topic to graduate in. And, you know, I followed them and sometimes advised them through their studies, and all of them graduated successfully in the field of cymatics. And I just think that's incredibly exciting. And I also personally know of 4 elementary students, like from the ages of 7 to 13, who have won their school science fairs through cymatics. They all did really interesting things with it, being kids. You know, they do things we'd never think of. And apparently their teachers had never thought of it or heard of it either, and I think that's the main reason they won, is that their teachers were just like, well, I don't understand what you're doing there, so you win. Which is awesome, because it's our kids teaching us, right? I'm sure there's actually way more elementary students than that who have won their school science fairs with cymatics at this point, but those are the 4 that wrote into me and said I won, so I know about them. And also, you know, if anybody saw Fantastic Four, probably not, but I did. I'm into superhero movies. So Fantastic Four was like a huge movie that I actually saw at the drive-in this summer, and at one point in the movie, the main character, you know, attempts to win his science fair with cymatics, and he didn't, probably because I think he got a lot of the science wrong, but that's okay. It was cool because there's this huge blockbuster movie, and they said the word cymatics like 10 times in it, so it's great. I'm just like, you know, however it works, that's awesome, right? So why should we care? So, why is all this important? Why is it important to spread cymatics around the world? And why is it really cool that it's well on the way to becoming a household word at this point? So, for me, I think the answer is that right now we live in a world that's disconnected. So as connected as we are to the internet and our cell phones and our screens and thousands of people who live thousands of miles away from us, we're disconnected from the incredible nature of the universe that's displayed around us every day. From the Fibonacci sequence of flower stems, to the beautiful pattern of dancing planets, to the geometry created in the water of our cells every time we hear a sound. We become deaf and blind to the magic surrounding us, and I believe that cymatics has the ability to open our eyes and ears again to the unexplained wonder of the universe that we knew as children. In my experience, it doesn't take a lot of explanation to rekindle this for people with cymatics. Just seeing it for the first time often makes the connection between the ordinary and the extraordinary for them in a few seconds. So I'm going to play this very ordinary plate for you this morning. It's modeled on a picture I saw on Wikipedia of Chladni playing a similar handheld plate for Victorian audiences in the 1700s. And this picture, if you look it up if you haven't seen it, because it's really cool, it's, he's standing there kind of like this with his lace ruff, I think, and there's all these, Victorian ladies sort of swooning as they watch him play his plate. I just thought that was really cool, and I was like, I have to make one of these for myself. So, swooning, yes. You can swoon if you like, I guess. It's a lost art that I think we should bring back, the art of swooning. So hopefully most people can see the plate from here. I know it's kind of hard to see the top of it sometimes. Thanks. You want to see one more or two? One or two more? Let's do one more and see what happens. Sometimes it's good to let the plate stop vibrating before you make the next pattern, to answer your question. And sometimes it's interesting to have it keep vibrating and make another pattern, and something interesting comes up because the two work together. Great. So my next project, I'd just like to tell you about quickly, is a trilogy of books. And what you heard in the beginning was the first part of chapter 1. of CYMATICA, book 1, which I just finished writing this past month, and it's in the editing and publishing process right now. And CYMATICA, the Trilogy of Books, it came to me one day back last January, and just kind of landed in my lap one day out of nowhere in a similar way that I had the dream about cymatics and the art that I was supposed to create. So while I had no intention at the time of starting to write a trilogy of books, I actually have 2 children, and I work during the day, and I work on my art between 3 and 6 in the morning, and I just really didn't have time to write a trilogy of books. But it was there, and I started taking notes, and within the space of a week or 2, the plots were laid out for the entire trilogy. And I was told that, I was supposed to be working on this, so I said yes. So I finished the first book, and basically, CYMATICA is a world where sound is magic and sound is power. And so the powers that be, when the story opens, have actually outlawed sound. They've outlawed cymatics and they've outlawed sound. And people go around with boxes over their ears. And they basically pretend that sound doesn't exist. And so the main character, Cambiare, who you heard a little bit about this morning, she is tasked with bringing sound back to CYMATICA. So it's a hero's quest kind of tale. So if you like that kind of thing, you'll probably like it. And one of the reasons that I think it's important to write a fantasy story about cymatics is that as a young person, I really read a lot of fantasy books. I know there's a lot of young people out there. It's kind of intended for a young adult audience. And I think that this is just another way of bringing cymatics to the world, to an audience that might not necessarily connect with it, but it's another portal, right? So one of the things I'd like to mention that I will be doing with that book that's kind of cool is creating a cymatic alphabet, using the symbols from the plate to create an alphabet, and then throughout the books there's going to be some secret codes in cymatics, and people will be able to read the secret messages once they understand the cymatic alphabet. So if you want to be alerted to when that book is out and available, what you can do is you can sign up for my mailing list on the Journal of Cymatics. So you basically just go to the Journal of Cymatics, and you can do it on your phone. If you have a phone that does that kind of thing, you can sign up, or you can go downstairs later today. I'm going to be down there all day at my booth. I'm going to have sounders for you to sing into. If you haven't tried that yet, you can go down and sing into them and see the shape of your voice. You can try playing the plate. Always happy to let people test that out. And I have talked about what I thought about cymatics and my experience of it here, and after my talk and later on today, I'd love it if you would come down and tell me about your experience of cymatics and what you think about it. Yes. Thank you so much for coming in this morning for a morning talk. I know some people aren't morning people. I am, but I also want to say, Ben, hey Ben, Ben has been using this really cool new technology called Meerkat. I don't know if you've heard of it, but basically you can stream things live from your iPhone. And so all of the other members at the Journal of Cymatics this morning have been here with us from all around the world. They've been enjoying the presentation live. And I want to say thank you to Ben for helping me do that. Ben actually has an amazing portfolio with him of cymatic images that he has created, and you should really pull him aside today and ask him to see his work, because it's some of the most intricate, interesting, amazing images I've ever seen. And then if you ask him why he's doing it and what he's trying to get at, he'll say something really interesting. So that's it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mandara.